say every forest has a voice. I say some forests learn to speak your language. Welcome to Duskwatch Grove, a place so deep in the Appalachian Mountains, it's been erased from the map. My name is Ethan Moreau, and I came here to bury my past, to find the silence my brother never did. Instead, I found myself living by 3 strange rules just to survive the night. What's the creepiest legend you've ever heard about the woods? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to step off the trail with me, subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Because in Duskwatch Grove, the trees don't just watch, they move. The patrol begins now, they tell you, in training, that every forest has a voice, a language spoken in the rustle of leaves and the snap of a twig. But they don't tell you what to do when it starts learning yours. My younger brother, Leo, walked into a forest that looked just like this one 10 years ago and never walked out, leaving me with a hollowed-out silence that screams his name on quiet nights. Now, the Park Service, in its infinite bureaucratic wisdom, has sent me to Duskwatch Grove, a place officially expunged from all maps, to permanently decommission a campground that's been swallowing people for decades. The air here, deep in the Appalachian folds, is different. It smells of pine and damp, rotting earth. But underneath that is a scent of old, cold fear, like a forgotten root cellar. The only welcome I received was a tattered, rain-warped note from the last ranger, the one who also vanished, with 3 bizarre rules for staying alive. Mark trees around camp with red paint each sunset. Unmarked trees move closer every night. If you find animal bones arranged like wind chimes in trees, cut them down and burn them. They're summoning circles for mountain demons. Never let the campfire die before midnight. Last night, my first night, I swear I saw a freshly painted red slash on a massive oak that was 10 feet closer to my tent than where I remember marking it just before the sun went down. My assignment was supposed to be simple. I was here with Jaden Voss, a bright-eyed, slightly awkward ecology student who'd been assigned as my intern to conduct a final biodiversity survey. He was all nervous energy and academic curiosity, a stark contrast to the leaden weight of experience that had settled deep in my bones since Leo. The ranger cabin was a dusty, one-room affair, smelling of mouse droppings and abandonment. It was there, on the small kitchenette table, that I found the note. It was written in a frantic, shaky hand on official Park Service letterhead. Cassidy Brent. That was the name of the ranger who disappeared 2 years ago. I read the rules aloud. Jaden laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Wow, creepy local folklore, huh? Guess the isolation really got to her. I wasn't so sure. I'd spent enough time in the deep woods to know that some places felt wrong. Duskwatch Grove felt profoundly wrong. I'd see the trees, ancient hardwoods and towering pines, grew too close together, their branches interlocking overhead to form a dense green ceiling that choked out the sunlight, creating a perpetual state of twilight at ground level. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, expectant. Folklore or not, I said, my voice flat. We follow the rules. All of them. Grab the paint. We spent the next 2 hours as the sun began its descent, creating a perimeter. The red paint was thick and garish against the gray and brown bark of the trees. It felt like a strange, profane ritual, marking this small patch of ground as ours. A tiny island in a vast, indifferent ocean of trees. Jaden treated it like a game, making jokes about territorial markings. But I noticed his laughter didn't quite reach his eyes, and he kept casting quick, furtive glances into the deepening woods. I worked in grim silence, the rhythmic hiss of the spray kind of fragile sound against the encroaching quiet. Each tree I marked felt like a prayer, a desperate plea to an unknown god of the forest. As true darkness fell, a deep, starless black unique to the deep wilderness, we built up the campfire in the stone-lined pit at the center of our small clearing. Rule 3. Never let the campfire die before midnight. The flames crackled and spat, a cheerful, defiant sound that pushed back the immense, suffocating darkness. We sat there, the firelight casting dancing, monstrous shadows around us. The silence pressed in. It was then that I heard it for the first time. Faint, distant, carried on a breeze that didn't stir the leaves. A child's laugh. High-pitched, innocent, and utterly, terrifyingly out of place in this forbidden, desolate wilderness. I froze, my hand hovering over my coffee mug. Did you hear that? Jaden, who had been poking the fire with a stick, looked up. Hear what? Probably just a loon. They can sound like that sometimes, echoing off the mountains. He offered a practiced, reasonable explanation, but his eyes weren't looking at me. They were darting nervously into the black wall of trees that surrounded us, the place from which the laughter had come. He was lying, and in that moment, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the marrow, that he had heard it too. Sleep didn't come easy. The thin nylon walls of my tent felt like a pitifully inadequate shield against the immense, watchful silence of the grove. Every snap of a twig, every hoot of a distant owl, sounded like a footstep, a warning. I woke before dawn to a strange new sound weaving through the quiet hiss of the dying campfire embers. It was a soft, dry clattering, a hollow musical clicking, like bamboo chimes in a light breeze. But there was no breeze. I unzipped my tent, my hand instinctively reaching for the heavy hatchet I kept beside my sleeping bag. The air was cold, still, and heavy with mist. The first thing I noticed was the trees. The perimeter of red-marked oaks and maples was still there, their painted slashes like bloody wounds in the gloom. But they were closer, not by much, just a few feet, but the space within our circle felt tighter, more claustrophobic. The forest beyond seemed to have pressed in on us during the night. A slow, silent, inexorable invasion. My blood ran cold. The first rule was not a suggestion. The clattering sound came again from the north, just beyond our perimeter. I pulled on my boots and, telling Jaden to stay put and tend the fire, I moved to investigate. He nodded, his face pale in the pre-dawn light, his eyes wide. I pushed through the dense, wet undergrowth, following the sound. What's alone? I know. I assumed he in the case. Following the sound, it led me to a small clearing, dominated by a single ancient oak, its branches gnarled and twisted like arthritic hands. And hanging from one of its thickest limbs was the source of the sound. It was a wind chime made of bone. Small, delicate vertebrae were strung together with what looked like dried sinew. Thin, brittle rib bones, perhaps from a fox or a raccoon, clicked against a hollowed-out bird skull. It was a grotesque, macabre piece of art, turning and clattering softly in a phantom wind. Rule 2. If you find animal bones arranged like wind chimes in trees, cut them down and burn them. They're summoning circles for mountain demons. Jaden, who had followed me despite my orders, let out a small gasp. Wow, he breathed, his voice a mixture of horror and fascination. That's incredible. The craftsmanship. It's like something from an old folk religion. I have to get a picture of this for my thesis. He raised his phone. No, I said, my voice sharp. We're not photographing it. We're burning it. A primal revulsion, a deep instinctual wrongness radiated from the object. As I reached for my hatchet, a whisper seemed to snake through the air, coiling around my ears. It was a child's voice, heartbreakingly familiar. Ethan, my breath caught in my throat. It was Leo's voice, my brother, clear as day. Help me, Ethan. I'm so cold. The voice seemed to be coming directly from the clicking, rattling bones. A wave of dizziness and profound sorrow washed over me. For a moment, I saw him, a faint, shimmering outline of a small boy, standing beside the tree, his hand outstretched. I shook my head, the illusion shattering. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. With a choked cry that was half rage, half grief, I swung the hatchet, severing the sinew cord. The bone chime fell to the forest floor with a dead final clatter. I scooped up the pieces, trying not to touch them with my bare skin, and carried them back to the camp. Jaden watched me, his face a strange, unreadable mask of disappointment and something else, clinical interest. I tossed the bones into the heart of the campfire. The flames, which had been a cheerful orange, suddenly flared, turning a brilliant, sickly, unnatural green. A high-pitched whistling sound, like a pained scream, erupted from the fire before it died down, returning to its normal color. The whispering of Leo's voice was gone. Later that morning, as I was widening the trail back to the main path, my boot heel caught on something buried in the damp soil. It was a small, waterproof field journal. Its cover blistered and mud-stained. Cassidy Brant's. I pried it open. Many of the pages were ruined, the ink a blurry mess. But one entry was still legible, written in a shaky, terrified hand. It read, "They sing a song the trees like to hear. They call it with the bones of the dead. The trees are his eyes." Cassidy's journal became my Bible and my curse. I spent every spare moment carefully separating the damp, clinging pages, deciphering her fragmented, panicked entries. The journal painted a terrifying picture of a woman slowly losing her mind, or perhaps finding a terrible new kind of sanity. She wrote of the trees, confirming my own horrifying observation. They move, not much, a few inches, maybe a foot, every night. They are patient. I paint them. The red paint is a fence, an old fence against an old hunger. She wrote of the mimicked voices, the cruelest trick in the forest's arsenal. It used my mother's voice today, asked me why I never called her. I almost answered, and she wrote of something else, something she only glimpsed at the edge of the firelight. A pale thing, tall, eyeless. It's not a bear. It's not a man. It walks on two legs, but its shadow has four. But my investigation into her disappearance was now an investigation into my own survival. The official report said she'd wandered off trail and succumbed to the elements. I knew that was a lie. The grove hadn't just killed her. It had digested her, driven by a need for a human voice that wasn't a student intern with unsettlingly curious eyes. I used the satellite phone to call Ben Harrow. He was the retired district forestry inspector who had overseen this region for 30 years. The man whose signature was on the original order to close Duskwatch Grove. He was a legend in the service, a cantankerous old bear of a man. He was silent for a long time after I told him what I'd found, what I had seen. I expected him to tell me I was crazy, that I had cabin fever. So the walking trees are at it again, are they? He finally grunted, his voice a gravelly rumble. There was no surprise in it, only a deep, ancient weariness. "And you're using the paint?" "Yes, sir," I said, my heart pounding. "The red paint?" "Good," he said. "Iron oxide. That's the key. Old mountain magic. Older than any church. The things in that grove, they're fey. Not the friendly kind with wings. The old kind. The ones made of wood and stone and spite. Iron is poison to them. Don't you ever miss a sunset, son. Not once." He hung up without another word, leaving me with a confirmation that was more terrifying than any doubt. That night, the forest showed its teeth. A savage, unnatural thunderstorm boiled up out of a clear sky, descending on the grove with shocking speed. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at our tents, and the rain came down in solid, freezing sheets, hissing and steaming as it struck the campfire. Rule 3, never let the campfire die before midnight. It became a desperate primal battle. The wind and rain were an intelligent, malevolent force, trying to extinguish our one shield against the absolute dark. We piled on every piece of dry wood we had, sheltering the flames with our bodies. the fire shrinking to a tiny, stubborn core of defiant light. The shadows at the edge of our camp grew deeper, and in the flashes of lightning, I could see them writhe and twist, taking on monstrous shifting shapes. The storm broke as suddenly as it had begun. Just a few minutes past the stroke of midnight, the fire survived. Barely. Exhausted, soaked, and chilled to the bone, I finally collapsed into my tent. The next morning, I stepped out into a world washed clean by the storm, and I saw the tracks. All around the perimeter of the camp in the soft mud were footprints. They weren't mine. They weren't Jaden's. They were the deep, perfectly formed cloven hoof prints of a deer. A massive deer, judging by the size and depth. The tracks led from the base of a huge, unmarked pine tree at the edge of the woods, circled my tent twice, and then stopped dead at the entrance flap before vanishing completely, as if the creature that made them had simply ceased to exist. The hoof prints that went nowhere broke something in me. The last vestiges of my skepticism crumbled into dust. This wasn't a series of explainable, if strange, phenomena. This was a deliberate, intelligent, and malevolent system, and my paranoia, which had been simmering just below the surface, now focused with laser-like intensity on the only other human being for 50 miles. Jaden Voss. His reactions were always just a little off. His fear seemed performative. His fascination with the macabre artifacts felt more academic than horrified. He was a variable I couldn't account for, a loose wire in a machine already designed to kill. That afternoon, while he was out, ostensibly collecting soil samples, I took the risk. I searched his tent. It was a betrayal of trust, a violation I would have never considered a month ago. But survival has its own, more brutal, code of ethics. His gear was standard student issue, but tucked away at the bottom of his duffel bag, inside a waterproof Pelican case, was a high-end external hard drive. It was password protected, but Cassidy Brent's name, the name of his so-called research subject, was a pitifully easy guess. The drive was a Pandora's box of forbidden knowledge. There were terabytes of data, not on biodiversity, but on occult folklore, pre-Christian nature worship, and tracks on entities known as genius loci, the spirits of a place. And there was a folder, the largest on the drive, labeled the Duskwatch Thesis. It was his journal, his research notes, and it was a chronicle of pure calculated horror. Jaden's entries detailed his experiments with cold scientific detachment. Day 3. Deliberately left the southern pine cluster unmarked. Observed movement of 3.7 meters overnight. Entity appears to exhibit photonegative tropism in relation to the iron oxide compound. He wrote about constructing the bone chimes himself, using different animal remains to attune the summoning frequency, as he put it. He had a log of the voices he'd heard, cross-referencing them with the missing persons reports from the Grove's dark history. He wrote about Cassidy Brent, not as a victim, but as a failed subject. Subject Brent exhibited extreme psychological resistance. Her ingrained belief systems, Park Service protocols, rationalism, interfered with her ability to integrate. Integration was terminated. He'd watched her get taken. He'd documented it. And then I found the entries about me. Subject Moreau presents a unique opportunity. The pre-existing trauma anchor, death of sibling, codenamed Leo, creates a powerful psychic vulnerability. He is highly resistant, but this makes him a more valuable subject. A direct controlled stimulus will be required to facilitate a full communion event. The friendly, awkward ecology student was a mask. Beneath it was a monster far colder than the eyeless deer in the woods. He was a high priest in a laboratory of cosmic horror, and I was his prize rat. My blood turned to ice as I read the final entry, dated just this morning. Subject Moreau's psychological defenses remain high, but the trauma anchor is strong and easily triggered. A direct stimulus is now required to break his resistance. The full moon is in 3 days. The main clearing has been prepared. The final offering is almost ready. He will see Leo again. I do know you're still tired. I The words on the screen were a death sentence written in cold, clinical prose. My entire reality tilted on its axis. The whispers, the moving trees, the bone chimes. They weren't just random acts of a malevolent forest. They were controlled experiments, orchestrated by the quiet, unassuming student, who at this very moment was probably cataloging moss samples a few hundred yards away. The polite mask of Jaden Voss concealed a sociopath of terrifying ambition. I was not his colleague. I was his subject, his offering. A cold, clear rage. The kind that burns away all fear and leaves only the hard, sharp edge of purpose. Settled over me, I copied the most incriminating files from his hard drive to a small, encrypted USB stick I always carried, then put everything back exactly as I had found it. He couldn't know that I knew. Not yet. My only advantage was the element of surprise. The hunter had just become the hunted, and he had no idea. When he returned to camp at dusk, he was the same Jaden as always, full of talk about soil acidity and beetle species, his face a perfect mask of harmless academic curiosity. I played my part, grunting in response, pretending to be the same stoic, slightly paranoid ranger he was used to. But as we began the nightly ritual of marking the trees with red paint, the act felt different. It was no longer a defense against an unknown entity. It was me, drawing the battle lines, reinforcing my cage before the zookeeper came to let the lion out. "You seem tense tonight, Ethan," Jaden commented, his voice casual, but his eyes were sharp, analytical, watching my every move. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied, my hand tightening on the spray can. "This place, it gets to you." "I know what you mean," he said, his voice dripping with a false empathy that made my skin crawl. "It has a very powerful presence." We ate in near silence by the fire, the unspoken tension a third entity between us. He was waiting for me to break. I was waiting for him to make his move. The forest around us was unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath, anticipating the main event. The moment came just after the moon. A sickly, swollen orb cleared the treetops. Jaden stood up, stretching casually. "Well, I think I'll turn in," he said. "Big day tomorrow." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wood whistle. It looked like it was made from pale, gnarled whitethorn wood. "Almost forgot," he said, giving me that same shy smile. "Found this today. Old bird call, I think. Wanted to see if it worked." Before I could react, he put the whistle to his lips and blew. It didn't produce a bird call. It produced a low, resonant note that was felt more than heard. A sound that vibrated in my teeth and resonated with the very marrow of my bones. It was a key, turning a lock deep within the fabric of the grove. And the forest answered. The reaction was instantaneous and absolute. The ring of red-marked trees that formed our prison suddenly came alive. Their branches, thick as a man's thigh, began to twist and weave together, the leaves rustling in a furious, coordinated motion. They were forming a solid, living wall, a dome of wood and leaves that sealed us in, blotting out the moonlight, plunging us into a terrifying firelit isolation. The ground trembled, and beyond our wall of trees, I heard a sound like 1,000 giants groaning in their sleep. The unmarked trees. They were moving, coming closer, their immense trunks dragging through the earth. A slow, inexorable army summoned by their master. Jaden watched the spectacle, his face transformed. The shy, awkward student was gone. In his place was a high priest, his face alight with ecstatic, fanatical power. "Isn't it magnificent?" he breathed, his eyes wide, reflecting the firelight, the pure, untamed will of the genius Loki. "You should feel honored, Ethan. Most people live their entire lives without ever witnessing true power." "What do you want, Jaden?" I asked, my hand moving slowly towards the hatchet on my belt. "Want?" He laughed, A genuine, triumphant sound this time. I want what any true scientist wants, Ethan. Data, observation, communion. For years, I've only been able to stimulate minor responses. The previous subjects were inadequate. Their minds were too weak, too brittle. They shattered. But you, your resistance, your connection to this place through your own trauma. You are the perfect conduit. Through you, I will finally be able to achieve a stable, full manifestation event. He blew the whistle again, a different, higher-pitched note. And from the darkness beyond the fire, a new sound began. The dry, clattering chorus of 100 bone chimes, all whispering in the sudden, unnatural wind. And through the whispers, I heard it again. Leo's voice. Not a faint echo this time, but clear, terrified, and seemingly right beside me. Ethan, I'm scared. It's so dark in here. Where are you? Help me. My head swam, the grief of physical, stabbing pain in my chest. I saw him, standing just at the edge of the firelight, a small, shivering boy with my eyes, his hand outstretched. I'm right here, Ethan. Come get me. He's not real, Ethan, Jaden said, his voice soft, coaxing. The voice of a hypnotist. Not yet. That's just an echo, a psychic projection formed from your own memories. But it can be. The entity can give him back to you. It can integrate him. All you have to do is let it in. Call out to it. Invite it. It was a brutal, psychological assault, using my deepest wound as the key to unlock the door. The image of Leo wavered, his face contorting. One moment my lost little brother, the next a hollow-eyed phantom with a mouth full of shadows. And then, from the darkest part of the grove, from behind a wall of moving trees, it came. The trees themselves seemed to bend away from it, granting it passage. It stepped into the firelight, and my breath caught in my throat, my heart seizing in a grip of pure primal terror. The hollow deer. It was a nightmare of nature. It stood nearly 9 feet tall at the shoulder, its hide a pale, sickly white that seemed to suck the light out of the air. Its body was that of a magnificent stag, but its proportions were subtly wrong. Its legs too long, its movements too fluid, too silent. And its head, it had no eyes. Only smooth, blank patches of hide where eyes should be. But its antlers were the true horror. They were not bone. They were a grotesque, tangled crown of what looked like pale, bleached human hands and forearms, frozen in positions of reaching, grasping, and clawing. It took a silent step forward, its eyeless face turning towards me. And though it made no sound, its voice filled my mind, a voice made of rustling leaves, cracking branches, and the absolute cold of the deep earth. You have come home, little lost one. It projected into my thoughts. You have come to join the grove. The hollow deer's psychic voice was a physical violation, a cold, alien presence that scraped against the inside of my skull. It showed me images, flashes of a world remade in its image. Cities overgrown with grasping vines, skyscrapers crumbling under the weight of ancient trees, a silent, green world where humanity was nothing more than fertilizer for a new, savage garden. And through it all, the phantom of my brother Leo stood at the entity's side, smiling, beckoning me to join them in the quiet, green eternity. See? Jaden whispered, his face a mask of ecstatic revelation. It's not an ending, Ethan. Ethan, it's a restoration, a return to purity. Just let go. Let it take the pain. But the sight of Leo's image twisted into this monstrous puppet didn't break me. It did the opposite. It filled me with a white-hot, righteous fury. This thing, this abomination, dared to wear my brother's face, to use my grief as a tool. Get out of my head, I roared, the words a raw, guttural sound. I broke from my paralysis and acted, My first target wasn't the deer. It was the chimes, the whispers, the illusions. Cassidy's journal said they were the entity's eyes and ears, its psychic antennae. I grabbed my hatchet from my belt and charged past the stunned Jaden, straight towards the nearest tree, from which a set of bone chimes was rattling. The hollow deer turned its eyeless face towards me, a psychic wave of confusion and annoyance washing over me, but it was too slow. I swung the hatchet, severing the sinew cord. The moment the bones fell silent, the vivid illusion of Leo flickered and vanished. The whispers on that side of the clearing died. It worked. No, Jaden shrieked, his scientific curiosity replaced by the fury of a priest whose altar has been desecrated. You're ruining the attunement. You're damaging the field. The hollow deer let out a silent, mental scream of frustration that made my teeth ache. It lowered its head, the antlers of human arms pointing towards me, and charged. It moved with an unnatural gliding speed, covering the ground in a terrifyingly short time. I didn't run. I stood my ground, my other hand fumbling in my pack for the canister of red paint. As the monstrous stag loomed over me, I pressed the nozzle and sprayed a thick, crimson slash directly onto its pale, featureless face. The creature recoiled, as if struck by lightning. A sound like sizzling bacon filled the air as its hide smoked and burned where the iron oxide-rich paint made contact. It was fey, an old thing of the wood, and iron, even in this form, was poison to it. It stumbled back, shaking its massive head, disoriented and enraged. This was my chance. I sprinted around the wounded entity, my goal now singular. Cut down the chimes. I was a whirlwind of frantic energy, swinging my hatchet, severing the summoning circles one by one. With each fallen chime, the oppressive psychic pressure in the grove lessened, the air growing clearer, the whispers fading. Jaden, saying his god wounded, and his experiment falling apart, finally snapped. He let out a scream of pure rage and tackled me from the side, his academic demeanor gone, replaced by the feral desperation of a cornered animal. He was surprisingly strong, and we crashed to the ground, rolling in the dirt and leaves. He pulled a nasty-looking survival knife from a sheath on his belt, its blade glinting in the firelight. "You are a blight," he hissed, his face inches from mine, his eyes wild with fanatical hatred. "An infection. You refuse to see the beauty. I will make you a part of this grove myself." He raised the knife. I blocked his arm, my muscles straining against his. We were locked in a desperate, primitive struggle for survival. A battle of wills at the feet of a wounded god. The hollow deer, recovering from the paint, was beginning to stir again, its eyeless face turning back towards us. I was running out of time. And then, a new voice, a woman's voice, clear and desperate, cut through the din, carried on the wind from the dark spaces between the trees. It wasn't a phantom. It felt real. The heart. The voice cried. It was Cassidy Brent. Not the deer. The heartwood tree. Cut the heart. Cassidy's words cut through the chaos, a beacon of clarity in the swirling nightmare. The deer wasn't the entity. It was a projection, an avatar. The real heart of the monster, its anchor to this physical plane, had to be something else, something stationary, something wooden. My eyes darted around the clearing, and I saw it. At the far end of the clearing, set apart from the others, was a single, ancient, and massive white oak. It was the one tree Jaden had never allowed us to go near, claiming it was a fragile, protected specimen. It was the only tree within the original perimeter that I hadn't marked with red paint. It was the heartwood tree. With a surge of adrenaline, I kicked out, connecting with Jaden's knee. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. I shoved him off me and scrambled to my feet, not running away, but charging directly towards the ancient oak. The hollow deer avatar let out another silent, psychic roar, this one filled with genuine panic. It moved to intercept me, its massive form a terrifying wall of pale hide and grasping, hand like antlers. I wouldn't make it, but Jaden, recovering, saw where I was going. No, he screamed, a sound of pure anguish, not the cradle. Leave it alone. He launched himself not at me, but at the avatar, tackling its legs, trying to slow it down, to protect his god's sanctum. It was a futile, insane gesture, but it bought me the 2 seconds I needed. I reached the base of the massive oak. It felt ancient, the bark like wrinkled stone. The air around it was freezing cold, and it hummed with a low, vibrating energy that made my fillings ache. This was the one. I didn't have an axe big enough to fell it, but I didn't need one. My mind flashed back to the storm, to the desperate battle to keep the fire alive. I ripped my emergency flare from my pack, tore off the cap, and struck the igniter. A brilliant, hissing, magnesium white light flared to life, blindingly bright. The hollow deer avatar, momentarily distracted by Jaden, turned back towards me, its eyeless face a mask of absolute terror. It lunged. I didn't hesitate. I jammed the burning, white-hot flare deep into a hollow at the base of the ancient tree, a cavity filled with dry, rotting punk wood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a wisp of smoke curled from the hollow, followed by a flicker of orange. The dry ancient wood, saturated with the entity's unnatural energy, caught fire with explosive speed. Flames roared up the trunk, engulfing the hardwood tree in a pillar of cleansing fire. The effect was absolute. The hollow deer avatar froze mid-stride. It didn't fade or dissolve. It crumbled, its form collapsing into a shower of dry leaves, gray ash, and blackened twigs, its psychic presence vanishing from my mind with a final agonizing shriek of severance. The moving trees groaned to a halt. The wind died. The whispers stopped. The oppressive, watchful presence that had suffocated Duskwatch Grove was simply gone. The only sounds left were the crackle of the burning tree and the pathetic, broken sobs of Jaden Voss, kneeling in the dirt, his god now just a bonfire. I contained the fire before it could spread, a grim, familiar task for any ranger. I apprehended Jaden, who offered no resistance, his fanaticism incinerated along with his cradle. I radioed for extraction, my report a heavily edited, carefully constructed narrative about a disturbed, pyromaniacal intern, a sudden wildfire, and a tragic but contained incident. It was the only version the world would believe. Jaden Voss was quietly institutionalized. His Duskwatch Thesis, with its talk of genius loci and communion events, was used as proof of his profound schizophrenia. Duskwatch Grove was permanently sealed, officially declared an ecological dead zone due to fire damage, a convenient excuse to keep people out for good. I was given a commendation for bravery under extreme circumstances, and quietly granted my request for a transfer to a desk in a city as far from the deep woods as I could get. Months have passed. I live in a small, sterile apartment that smells of concrete and traffic. The silence here is different. It's empty, not watchful. But I still have the photo on my desk, the one of me and Leo, taken on that last hiking trip a decade ago, in a completely different national park, 1,000 miles from the Appalachians. Last night, I was looking at it, tracing the ghost of my brother's smile, and I saw something I had never ever noticed before. In the deep background of the photograph, partially obscured by a stand of aspens, was a distinctive-looking ancient oak tree, and carved into its bark, so small I had to use a magnifying glass to be sure, was a crude, childlike drawing. It was a picture of a deer, and its antlers were shaped like hands. The grove was just one tree in a forest that spans a continent. The voice hasn't been silenced. It's just learned to whisper from other places. And it still knows my brother's name. It still knows mine.